Hello and welcome to this first installment of Garage Gaming. In front of me here is Tomb Raider 2. Now, this game has been in my garage for a very long time, but had been well used up to that point, as you can see. Now, the premise of this whole series is that I have a load of games in my garage, and I need to sift through to see which ones are going to be kept and which ones are going to have to go. But Tomb Raider 2 is at its 25th anniversary now, and I want to see if it's still good. Now, I was surprised to see that the auto-run queues came up right away, which I wasn't expecting in Windows 10. And to be perfectly frank with you, I really didn't expect the setup installer thing to actually show up without having to muck about with the compatibility settings. Nonetheless, it actually did, so my optimism was buoyed seeing this. Fortunately, time has moved on since the 1990s, so at least now you can install it at speed, which you certainly couldn't on a Pentium 166 MMX. What was even more surprising was to see that it offered 1920 by 1080 resolution. Now, back in 1997, I can't even begin to imagine what 1920 by 1080 would have looked like. Still, I'm hitting play, and for some reason, unbeknownst to me, it booted into the load screen without any hesitation. I don't know of any 90s game, aside from this one, perhaps, and a few others, that didn't simply cause problems from the get-go. Although one problem with running this on the CD is that it does tend to hang somewhat. Now, it has been a while since I actually did this assault course, and my lack of skill, it really is showing here. Probably haven't played this since the late 2000s at the very latest. Now, I will be honest, I am not seeing any particular difference between playing it on an old 14-inch CRT monitor and playing it on a 1080p LCD monitor. It still looks equally as blocky as it ever did. Although, now that we're coming up to 25 years after the fact, I can't help but find it slightly inducing of the old nostalgia factor. I remember doing this quite a lot as a kid and really just getting my knickers in a twist, for want of a better expression. The amount of times I'd actually just come off the course entirely and go into an absolute screaming fit doesn't even bear thinking about now. But what does bear thinking about is performance. Now, I thought it would be an absolute academic interest at best, and complete waste of time at worst, trying to find out what kind of FPS this game would return on modern hardware. Although I use that term advisedly, as my GPU isn't really the last word in modernity. But I was surprised to see that it only recorded 29.4 FPS on average, and there are other performance issues too.
Gosh, that was my best time yet.
And half the problem of running off of a CD is that it lags.
Feel free to explore the rest of the house and gardens.
Now, I'm going into Croft Manor, and I really love just mucking about on Lara's mansion. Now, among my favourite things to do, and I'm not the only sadist to do this, is to treat Winston to the British winter, and given the cost of living crisis, it's not unlikely that people of a similar age to Winston as portrayed here will be facing similar feelings. But anyway, back in the 90s as a 5-year-old playing this, I didn't really care. Anyway, we jump, and we put him away in the freezer. And that's like a Simpsons episode where Kent Brockman was covering a story, geezers in freezers, and that is very literal in this case. But there are other ways of getting rid of Winston as well, and in reference to Father Ted, when they had Father Stone coming round for one of the annual visits, which always turned out to be absolute purgatory. They went into the attic just to avoid him. And I was party to doing this kind of thing myself in order to avoid Winston. But unfortunately, it's not really conducive to playing a computer game at all. In fact, unless you were playing something like a point and click, like Normality, there wouldn't be much fun to have here. Something I always found curious about this scene, since ditching Windows 95, is that the audio just doesn't match up with what's going on in the video. I'm still undecided as to whether this is a good thing for nostalgia or just irritating to this day.
Though not anymore. So after you.
Now, this is the mission which got me hooked. This is the mission that I watched my godmother, of all people, play in 1998. It's probably the earliest gaming that I could really remember with any clarity. And for me, the mission Venice is just a complete vibe. I love it. There's nothing quite like it, in my view. Although others may, of course, disagree. But for me, it just goes to demonstrate that you don't even have to be particularly good at playing computer games. You can still enjoy them even if you're not particularly good. But I'd be interested to hear what the people viewing this, if anyone is viewing this, I'd be interested to hear what your favourite TR2 level is, and please leave your comments down below. But watching this play out, it brings me nostalgia. It reminds me of a time, probably about 2 weeks ago, when I would have been playing this anyway. But for me, it's not really that different watching it being played out on CD or off of GOG, which is where I have my digital copies, or Steam for that matter, with the exception of the CD version being a bit choppy, as you've seen here. Now, I'll be honest, I'm unsure as to how well this whole secrets thing would hold up in 2022. Part of me suspects that it would be seen as horrifically outdated, and perhaps it's right. This is aimed at a mature audience, or a slightly more mature audience back then. And I'm not sure that a mature audience for 2022 would see things the same. But I like having this, because it's something different from just getting kills and making sure that you don't get killed in order to get to the end of a mission. Now, the music in Venice is absolutely wondrous, and I'll be honest, even as a 4 or 5-year-old listening to this for the first time, I found it very melodious, very entrancing, and I am well aware that loads of people are probably going to be thinking, well, a 4 or 5-year-old shouldn't really be playing this, and perhaps you're right, but I've been playing this game long enough now, and I'm ancient, positively ancient now. I've been playing this game long enough that I know the shortcuts to take. Now, I'm not playing it as the Prima Guide, if anyone remembers those, as the Prima Guide would encourage you to play it. Now, that would be encouraging you to play it as the developers had intended. Me, not so much. Now, I am going up to this bridge and this upper level here just for the purpose of getting a good visual on the guy with the semi-automatic pistols at the gatehouse. I want to take him out because if I didn't, there's a very good chance that by the time I got back to the bombs at the end of the mission, he'd take me out. And I don't really want that to happen. So, now that he has been fully disposed of, I'm going to go back and, well, you'll see what happens. But another thing that I found immensely entertaining as a 4 or 5-year-old, I forget exactly how old I was when I first watched this being played and was first handed the controls to play it, was driving around in these boats. and I think that's part of what makes Venice an absolute vibe for me. Now, I'm going to drive up to this jetty here. Now, ordinarily, you should drive in, and I will explain what happens next, but I want to get rid of this goon first. Now, I'll go over to the jetty thing itself, and I'll hit the switch on the end wall there. Ordinarily, what's supposed to happen is once you hit the switch, you get back in your boat, and you drive off the end of the ramp, which sets a timer going. However, this is one of the weaknesses of 90s gaming, insofar as it doesn't really account for you finding ways around things, although, having said that, it does test your ingenuity somewhat to find these workarounds. As such, because I haven't driven off the end of the ramp, I don't have the timer going. I jump out of where the third secret is, and you'll note that I got a lot of semi-automatic pistol ammunition for having collected all 3 of the secrets. There's no timer going. Usually you'd hear a gonging in the background, but there's none of that here. Now we're coming up to the end of the mission, and this is a very condensed version of the mission itself. And jump out of the boat, and the bombs have gone off. Now you must jump out of the boat, and there's usually 2 boats provided, the other of which we simply swam past, so that you can detonate the bombs, but still have a boat. Now, if this game is in your garage, I'd definitely recommend that you have a go at it at least. It's not going to cause any particular problems for you in terms of running it on Windows 10, and based on my experience running it on Windows 11, although that was the GOG version, it should be fine too. But don't go out of your way to buy a copy, unless you see it in CEX for 50p or something. I'd advise you to stick with the Steam or the GOG versions. The only reason I would not recommend those is this expansion pack, the Golden Mask, which features 5 extra missions. Well, 5 if you collect all the secrets at least. And it was an unexpected treat for us, because the Godparents version of this game didn't have the expansion pack, but for us, because we bought ours in '99, we got the expansion pack for it, and we were treated to these extra missions. And would you believe, it actually took until last year for me to finally get through all of the missions on this expansion pack. Primarily because I didn't know how or where to collect all the secrets on these missions. So I finally got access to Nightmare in Vegas not very long ago, and I played that. But this expansion pack is a very good addition, primarily because it has somewhat of a convincing storyline. And this last mission, which I'm not going to show you the ending of, primarily because I'd be spoiling things a bit for you there, is very good. And even the cinematics, blocky and all as they may be, there is a certain charm to them. But also, this expansion pack does test your abilities with baddies of a different nature. Like, you would come across yetis and so forth, similar creatures to these, in the standard game, when you'd be at the Ice Palace, and so forth. And again, I've been playing this game long enough now that there is workaround for me, and you will see this in action here. Problem is that the enemies on this game are not what you could call agile, especially if they're not armed with guns. And you will see this to full effect here with the Yetis coming in. As you see this guy come around, he doesn't even climb up onto the movable object. And then the next one comes in and does more or less the same thing, almost as if the AI has been very much restricted, although you can't really have a go too much at 1990s AI. It was still very much in its infancy. But in conclusion, would I recommend this game to people in 2022? Absolutely. I really would recommend this game to people in 22, and for what it's worth, even though I have the digital versions of this game. Frankly, you've seen the condition of my case for this game. Not even the charity shops would want it, and there's not really much point in recycling CDs and so forth. So for what it's worth, I think it has a place in my garage, still. And it has a place in my heart too. This and MechWarrior 2 and Normality and Pod were my introduction to computer gaming, and this is probably the only of those games to still maintain a certain level of relevance in 2022. Of course, the shadow of the Tomb Raider and so forth has come along since then, but it's not dead yet, unlike my version of Lara. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.